Transition, the process of change from one condition to another.
We are now at a new crossroad where change is evident once again.
What does not serve us must transform us anew.
Returning to our original state of oneness and true nature of that which created who we truly are.
Confusion was the way of the past. Enlightenment is the way of the now and future, shedding away the layers of deceit.
We now bring you the transformation of the two who started as one. Our fearless planet never stands still.
Earth has been in a process of transition, and we are not exempt from this remarkable, ongoing reality. Well, hello. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Transition Radio Shows, Real Talk with the Cummings. My name is Mark Angelo.
And I'm Lenny Ariel. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We don't have a guest, but we do have a great topic that we would love to discuss with you guys.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's we're living in times that they're just, it's like the Twilight Zone. You know, people have their way of believing and thinking. I don't know. I think we stepped into a black hole. I really do. I mean, the other day they were talking
there was like what is it? An eclipse?
Yeah, that and the black hole.
On election day, there was an eclipse.
Yeah, and there was this black hole that literally violently just kind of like destroyed the star, you know, kind of thing.
I didn't see that.
Oh, yeah. I saw that the other day on the news thing, you know. It's crazy stuff. But yeah, we are seeing a lot of really violent behavior towards individuals of the LGBTQ, RSTUV, you know, the alphabets and the letters of the spectrum. But
plus, minus.
Yeah, and fractions and 9 yards. But it's really sad to see the anger, the violence, I can't even find words.
The vitriol, like that they express towards people. It's almost like you can really sense their disgust for us. Yeah, like never before. I mean, I'm 58 years old. I've been part of the LGBTQ community since they're around 13, 14 years old. You know, I knew something was going on with me, and I've never seen this. Even back in the day when we were in the closet, it wasn't as vitriolic as it is now. And I have to blame the GOP. I have to blame these. We have a different acronym for the GOP than they would like to call themselves. They call themselves a grand old party, but we call them the gender oppressing people.
Yeah. And they have problems with anything that is not their typical black and white, all-American, Christian, patriotic, I think it's one size fits all.
I think it's based on the old guard of white Christian nationalism that has been kind of the bedrock of American civilization, American, culture for a long time. And there's a survey out that says by 2040, white Anglo people in this country are going to be in the minority. And I really don't think that people like that in this country.
No, they don't. They don't. Not at all. But, evolution will take place. Karma will unfold. Things that have been done in the past towards people will be paid for some way or another. And, the new generation is just not going to take the old dinosauric behavior.
No, it reflects in the polls too, because you see here in the state of Arizona, in the Gen Z, is it Gen Z? Gen Z, yeah. 18 to 29-year-olds, they voted overwhelmingly, almost I think it was 70% for the Democrat governor, and candidate. instead of the Republican candidate. And that reflects a huge shift in how people want to see the future. And that's not necessarily the blue Democrat, red Republican. I think it's more like they're wanting to see a different world, you know.
They've seen what the old world has gotten, what it has provided, and they don't like it. They don't like it one bit. And why should they? It's like it's time for a change. It's time for a big change, and they're kicking and screaming, and they definitely don't want it to be that way. And we're seeing it reflect in so many different ways. Like, for instance, we've got Joe Rogan here. Oh, and before we go into that, I want to talk about trans awareness. Okay, trans awareness. Let me do this here. I think that's better. This is, I don't know how many years they've been celebrating, or not celebrating, but what's the word? Commemorating the
Trans Day of Remembrance
and the violence that has been towards trans individuals, the hatred, the inability to accept people for their differences.
Right.
And so this whole month is trans.
No, it's this week. It's called Trans Awareness Week. And on next Sunday, is Transgender Day of Remembrance. Okay. And it's typically when people gather and they name off names of the deceased, of people that had their lives taken just simply because they were trans. 389 people worldwide. I think it was like 69 here in the United States, 50 in Mexico, 102 in Brazil. These needless, senseless murders of people just because they chose to identify differently than,
and chose to do with their life what they felt was the most appropriate thing for them. But individuals like right here that we're watching, or you're watching on our screen here, Matt Walsh and Joe Rogan has been all over the place with this topic. He's been accepting. I mean, he's pretty liberal,
Right.
I don't understand why all of a sudden, after they slapped him on the wrist, he's kind of gone to the dark side. But I'm thinking maybe it's all like ketogenic. He's got the ketogenic eyes. Puffy eyes. Yeah. So, he invited Matt Walsh to his podcast, and they're comparing transness to being in a cult. And we hear that a lot, from gender critical people, right. From Christians, although, they themselves are very questionable to be in a cult themselves.
Yeah. I mean, people that don't agree with the other person, they always label the other one nowadays as having been in a cult. They're in a cult or something. There's a cult of belief that people want to just peg others into.
Exactly. So Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh sitting in the same room together, right? They're having the discussion. Walsh, a right-wing commentator and self-proclaimed theocratic fascist, recently joined Rogan's podcast to spew more absolute BS about trans people. And they just love doing that,
Well, I mean, he loves to instigate.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, they even asked him, Joe Rogan said, "So what's up with puberty blockers? What's going on with that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, there's like millions. How many? Oh, they're in the millions of kids." And it's like, well, there's only been like 4,600 kids that have been given puberty blockers in this country over the past, several years.
Right. But
so
he likes to exaggerate.
We only have like 1.5 million people that identify as trans in the entire
world.
Or I mean, it's like in the United States. So I mean, these numbers and people, how they exaggerate things. He was embarrassed on the show though, because Joe's like, "What? Are you sure about that?"
And that's his fact check individual. So nope, wrong. But that's how these GOP, that's how these conservatives gather, people. They rile them up with all these one-liners and lies, and they don't realize that they are creating a lot of harm, not just for trans people, but for queer people, for gender non-conforming individuals, because people have no clue. They lump us all in one box, right?
Oh yeah.
So
in the November 7th episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan's Spotify exclusive podcast, The Pairing from Hell, spread hateful disinformation about trans people, referring to transness as a fetish, quote unquote, and a mental health issue. According to a recap of the episode from Media Matters, Walsh claimed that there were different categories of people who transition, and basically those things could be broken down by age.
right.
So he's like this self-proclaimed guru now of all things trans, and knows everything about transgender people and why people transition.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Walsh claimed that young children identifying as trans could only be attributed to parental influence. That's 1,000%. The parents just deciding they're going to do that because no child even knows what that is. So you have to suggest that to them, Walsh said, right? So, however, in one of the wildest ranging studies of trans youth, University of Washington researchers found that cis and trans children have equally strong sense of identity.
That notion was additionally corroborated by researchers from Princeton University. And while Walsh is implying that children don't even want to transition, science has also shown that regret over transitioning is exceedingly rare, and that 98% of patients who take puberty blockers go on to take HRT, hormone replacement therapy.
But of course, neither Walsh nor Rogan are particularly concerned with facts, as demonstrated by Walsh's next proposed category, adolescent girls, quote unquote. He cited Abigail Shire's, the quote unquote great book, Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. In the book, Schreier, who has also claimed that school gay students' alliances are secretly recruiting children and into a nefarious agenda that endorses the extensively debunked theory of social contagion, claiming that a generation of girls is at risk of being subjected to transition-related care.
Lastly, Walsh claimed that there was a cohort of older men who are adults and decide one day that they are women. And he also just broke it all down as, these older men, all they do is like fetishize the younger ones, and that this is like some unspoken secret within the trans community that nobody wants to talk about. And there are all kinds of people in the trans community. There are all kinds of outliers and different kinds of motivations for people identifying as trans.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. But, I say shame on Joe. I mean, he was raised with parents that taught him better, and he was pretty much an ally for. Been going back and forth.
He's had other trans people on his show.
Yeah,
has been very kind to them.
Yeah, but I don't know what happened to Joe there. With out of all the guests, Matt Walsh. I mean, people like Matt Walsh are the ones that incite the violence, create a lot of issues.
Yeah,
big time issues. But what are you gonna do? So the GOP attacks on trans kid healthcare explained. Okay, you're kind of wondering, why are the Republicans, even this lady who's running for governor here now, started a campaign against her opponent, claiming that the husband treats, it's a psychologist or psychiatrist of some sort, and is all for transitioning kids. And that was one of her dirty under last minute thing.
Lobs.
And we're seeing this massive move by the GOP utilizing transsexuals as a tool to rile up their base, and I think that's pretty below the belt. That's not, we should not be politicized,
No.
That's not something that anyone from the LGBTQ community should be politicized or used as a pawn.
Neither should detransitioners be used by the GOP, but as we've seen in the last, several months, that this has been a major, major strategy of the Republican Party and extreme right-wing factions and Christians and Christian nationalists that really want to utilize this as, as fuel
Definitely.
to get people to vote.
And I don't think it worked that well for them, because they were planning to have this red wave.
Yeah, they were expecting big things. They were expecting they could take control of both the Senate and the House. And as far as I know right now, they lost control of being able to get the Senate.
Yeah.
And the House is still up for debate now. It's still not decided.
It hasn't been decided. And there's some individuals that are part of the LGBTQ that actually
I mean, a trans man actually became a state representative, and a trans woman in Montana was able to also get a seat. And I think the governor of Oregon is a lesbian woman. And she was openly lesbian, and she won like by a wide margin.
That's only going to piss Christians off more. I mean, ever since gay marriage has been accepted and allowed, they're just angry, and they're trying to find ways to, now they're picking on transsexuals, and that's their latest, but they still want gay marriage gone, just how they overturned Roe versus Wade, and, all that stuff that they're slowly trying to remove all the rights that we have gotten throughout the years.
I thought it was interesting, though. We're not going to mention the person, but there's a trans woman who has a family, had a child in vitro with her spouse, with their wife, and basically she's a trans woman, and she lives in a state that is now really cracking down on trans identification and people being able to express that whole don't say gay thing.
Right.
And so she was on Twitter, and she was talking about how she was going to be able to talk to people about who she was, and that if that was going to be dangerous for her to be open about who she is. And for her daughter also to express that. And people were just so mean. I mean, there is just this animosity that's been like seething, and it seems like it's tied to like a real racist bigotry, like discriminatory hatred.
Yeah, but it's all been pretty much engineered. I think there's been this high influx on transgender things or transsexual things for a little bit, and it's almost like the story hour, drag queen story hours, and in your face type of things, like even the Leah Thompson. I think that could have been a plant, for all we know, to get people upset. The drag queen story hour could also be a fabricated, created thing to upset parents. And so I wouldn't put anything past these individuals. I really wouldn't. I mean, they're capable of anything to get their way. So you have to really understand how these people work. They create the problem to then find the solution. And the solution is always to take away more of your freedoms. The solution is always to just create problems for the people. So trans advocates have pointed out that these bills fit comfortably with the larger GOP plan to seize minority power in an effort to force their preferred gender dynamics.
The voting restrictions being passed in these state houses are the fuel, and the limits on women and trans people are the fire. Gillian Branstetter, a spokesperson for the National Women's Law Center, told Fox, they know their retrograde views on gender are deeply unpopular, and they need to rig the game in order to be able to do it without facing consequences.
I mean, just look at, the abortion thing that just happened a while ago. It's like they're doing all these things to like to entice their base, which is Christian, very conservative, you know, right-wing propaganda, and they know exactly what they're doing. They know the points, the things that really get people riled up and out into the voting booths, right? So why are Republicans trying to legislate trans kids' care? I mean, since when have they really give a damn about anything other than themselves, right? Well, in late 2019, the anti-trans legislative movement was seemingly on its last legs. It had found early success by passing North Carolina's bathroom bill, HB2, which dictated that trans people use governmentally owned bathrooms according to the sex designated on their original birth certificate in 2016.
But HB2 ended in a disaster for Republicans after a massive outcry and a resulting boycott from the NCAA, major corporations, and others that lost the state an estimated $3.7 billion in state revenue. The bathroom bill was partially repealed, and the state's Republican governor, Pat McCrory, the bill's chief cheerleader, was run out of the office.
And you know, they don't seem to learn, because they're trying to do stuff now which is going to backfire. You shouldn't have to worry that your kid is going to abruptly be cut off from their care because lawmakers want to destroy them, said Strangio. There are so many conversations about whether people can leave their jobs, whether people have enough savings, and we're creating a massive amount of displacement within our own country, he said about the Arkansas bill.
Lawmaker after conservative lawmaker has used the debates over these bills to not so coyly push their opinion that trans kids should not legally exist. And that would be also for any trans person.
Yeah, we don't exist according to most people. However, conservative legislators with their bills to ban transition care have other ideas for trans children's futures. They appeal to the fallacy that natal puberty is natural and therefore necessary for all kids.
But this approach would force trans girls into male puberty and trans boys into female puberty without their consent, and brings along its own permanent changes, which could only be partially reversed through painful and expensive medical treatments in adulthood.
And that's what they don't understand. You know, they don't understand that when you're truly trans, these changes that are caused by puberty are devastating. And, you know, hundreds and not thousands of dollars, more in the thousands, have to be spent to alter yourself. Trans women forced through male puberty would then have to undergo painful and expensive electrolysis to remove facial hair and may be left with a body frame, shoulder and hip width that would be unchangeable by any surgeries.
Trans men would have to have surgery to remove their breasts and, like their trans female counterparts, be forced to live in an unwanted body frame for their entire lives.
I mean, these are things that these folks don't care about, because, you know, we don't exist. You know, we're like some sort of anomaly. You know, there's male and there's female, and there's nothing else according to them, and there's nothing that could take place that will create who we are. So, but they don't realize that although there are side effects to puberty blockers, there's side effects to every medication you'll ever take. There's also a lot of benefits, especially when you're trans. When you have a successful teen that transitions and doesn't have to deal with these secondary characteristics, their life is a lot easier.
Absolutely.
You know, totally. But these folks just love to add fuel to the fire and use detransitioners now as their pawn, as their tool of choice to rile up their base again and get everybody upset and just talk about how mean, you know, those of us that are trans are towards these detransitioners. But these detransitioners are helping these GOP bring down the house, right?
Chloe Cole is one of those young transitioners, detransitioners from the state of California, who was a guest on one of the most right-wing news shows out there by Tucker Carlson, and she was introducing something that she wanted to have take place now.
Yeah, and we watched it. We would share it, but we don't want any copyrights hits or any weird things like that. But she wants to hold gender affirming surgeons accountable, even though they knew what they were getting. They said they didn't. Okay, but this day and age, and I know when you're 13, you're not fully mentally developed, but you kind of know that if you're going to have body parts removed, they're not going to grow back, as many of them believe or discuss or whatever. And if you are going to go on male hormones, you're going to go on them because you want certain changes to your voice, to your look, and it's just they're being used as an scapegoat. They're like, well, it didn't work for Chloe, so it's not going to work for anybody else.
I was amazed at how the comments from that interview were like, and I heard you talking, and I was in tears because you said that, this shouldn't take place, and, that you shouldn't have had to have gone through what you went through. And what I noticed, if you guys would watch it, we'll probably have a link to it. But if you guys watch the interview, Chloe is stuttering through the whole thing, is only giving it's like Tucker Carlson is lobbing a softball question and she's like swinging at it, and it's like, it's so premeditated.
Yeah.
It's so pre-done. It's so pre-scripted, and they had like a lawyer show up that was going to be, I guess, doing this case against the medical providers at Kaiser Permanente. I mean, it was like, and when you find out that the lawyer actually,
we have some stuff on the lawyer there,
right?
And some stuff on somebody rebuting some of the things, because Chloe appears to be very active on Twitter. We don't believe it's actually Chloe that's actually responding and not on that account. The reason being, if you watch Chloe, whenever she gets interviewed, she doesn't put two sentences together very easily and becomes very distracted. And it's not, possibly it's her Asperger that just interferes with her thought process and communication skills. But everything's very scripted, as you mentioned, and obviously she couldn't have her little show notes in front for this particular interview. And she's just all over the place and like repeating the same things over and over again. But if you guys don't know who she is by now, she's, started on puberty blockers, which I don't understand why, because she started puberty at 9 years old, according to what she has said in the past. And they started taking testosterone at age 13, underwent a double mastectomy at 15, detransition. So a couple of years, and, it didn't.
It's almost like a year here, a year there, and a year there, and then we're done.
We call those transtrenders? But they're using these transtrenders, to paint the picture that transitioning teens is bad because it hasn't worked for maybe a handful of them. I mean, they keep recycling the same ones. And the ones that are coming out of the woodwork now are a lot of the ROGD, the transgender that had no business transitioning. There are deeper issues with these folks. But anyway, I'll share this link. I'll put it in the description area.
So the keywords that Chloe likes to use in so many of the interviews is that as an adult, that she will never be able to breastfeed whatever children she will have. And she doesn't even know if she's going to be, because she was put on puberty blockers, although puberty blockers didn't block puberty for her, I guess, and testosterone. And testosterone.
Right.
So you usually don't get put on puberty blockers and testosterone. No. That's not how the protocol works.
No, not at all.
Testosterone is given after the puberty blockers have been administered,
Right.
and there's like, it's like, okay, you go from puberty blockers, and then it's like you graduate to HRT.
Right. Because the puberty blocker is meant to stop puberty. Well, if you already had puberty, what was the use of being put on puberty blockers, But, she's suing the doctors who perform the gender affirming surgery. And I think good luck with that one, because I don't think there's going to be any possibility of suing, because everything,
they bake protections in for themselves.
Exactly. Everything was explained to the parents, and the parents were very much, gun ho.
So is she going to sue her parents because she says, I want to hold the adults that put me in harm's way accountable? Because what happened to me is horrible.
Yeah,
but it also didn't only happen to me. That's the worst part. It's happening to children all over. See, so this isn't just a Chloe thing. This is a concerted effort by right-wing political operatives to utilize the story, the sympathy garnered for a young detransitioner who no longer wants to transition. And it's like it is so like, it's like, okay, here's this and here's that and here's that, let's make the story.
And they're claiming medical malpractice, and there's no medical malpractice because everything was followed as a protocol. And they're going to find out the hard way that this is not going to, it's not going to get them anywhere. And the representative, or the attorney that's representing her, is the nonprofit organization, the Center of American Liberty. And is it Hamlet Dillon?
Harmeet
Dillon. Dillon, yeah. So let's go into, let me bring up.
So the reason that we say the GOP is behind a lot of what's happening is because Harmeet is actually a committee woman with the Republican Party in the state of California. And her organization, American Center for American Liberty.
Let me share this on that so we got it here. Okay.
So yeah, she was a legal advisor on the Trump 2020 campaign. And while with the Trump campaign, she was making false and unsubstantiated voter fraud claims, not unlike Carrie Lake does now.
Right.
And was hoping that the Supreme Court, including the Trump appointed judges, were going to help Trump win the presidency.
Right. And then we got some more stuff here. On July 2019, Dillon gave a speech at the President Trump's social media summit. So we're putting MAGA together with, this whole, so Dillon is a co-chair of a Women for Trump, and she has described Laura Ingraham as a longtime mentor.
So she has, well, we can go to the next one.
Yeah.
She is an American lawyer and a Republican Party official. So put two and two together. A Republican Party official who actually does commentary for Fox News gets invited to be on a show with Republican, leaning Tucker Carlson. And she's supposed to be like some non-invested, no opinions really. Right. I'm just an outsider here representing my client. But she's
the founder,
was the vice chairwoman of the California Republican Party,
and is the founder of the law practice called Dillon's Law Groups Incorporated.
And she helped launch the nonprofit Center for American Liberty, which does legal work related to civil liberties that they want to see in this country.
Exactly. So that's
like you got like these people, they appear to be like not really a part of what's happening with the GOP, but they are literally the GOP.
They are, and they're using detransitioners as a tool. Like I mentioned earlier, they're very upset from the whole fact gay marriage was legalized. So they have a bone to pick. with the LGBT. And right now they're picking on the T, and they're utilizing children, which is what they've done for many years now with the bathroom thing and just pissing people off, scaring people that all of a sudden we bad trans people are going to be taking your kids and transforming them. We're going to be doing all these awful things, and your kids aren't going to be normal anymore because we're going to go to your schools and we're going to do all these horrible things.
But that's the same thing that they did back in the 70s and 80s with the amount of hatred that was thrown at gay and lesbians.
Yep.
You would know, you lived through it.
Oh, yeah. And it was just awful. Most people don't even have a clue. So we have seen ever since they've been doing all of this, the decline in the support in trans people. There's just a very different.
Back when you transitioned, people were literally curious.
Yeah, they were. They were like,
they weren't like, oh, gross. They were like, oh my gosh, that's possible.
Wow, I would have never known. Yeah, that kind of thing. It was like it wasn't a hateful type of thing. It was like they were curious. It was rare, right? So it was like, you literally, yeah. But now it's like there's this anger, there's disdain, this vitriol towards trans people, and it's I believe very thankful to these GOP and a lot of these right-wing conservative Christian based individuals.
Yeah. And it's not just here in the United States either. It's like this concerted effort across the world. Anywhere right-leaning politics has a stranglehold on the country, you have people like Richie over there, Tula over there in Great Britain, giving speeches at the Lesbian Gay Alliance, which has nothing to do with the Lesbian Gay Bisexual Alliance, LGBT Alliance, has nothing to do with anything for the protections of lesbian, gays, or bisexuals, but is just a hate group that's been created with that moniker so that they can gang up on trans people. And Richie's like, oh, and I was young and I didn't know, and the doctors coerced me and I was forced into it. And it's like, you're 26 at the time. And then you're a grown adult.
He revealed his personality, that he was able to take things and turn it around and use it against people. So how do we know he's not doing the same thing now?
Yeah, he candidly opened up about his personality and said that if he was literally on the other side of the argument and was actually pro-trans, he would take someone's argument and he would turn it around on them and he would try to use it against them. So what's to say, like you said, that he's not using the same tactics right now? Because he's upset.
He's very upset.
Rightfully so. Yeah. His surgeries have really damaged him in a certain extent. There are real complications that he's facing for the rest of his life. And he's really, he said, pissed off.
Right. And it's almost like a revenge. That's what I'm seeing with a lot of these trans or detransitioners, that there's a revenge. Their surgery didn't go well. Same thing happened with Shapeshifter. And a lot of them, things went wrong. The hormones didn't agree with their body. This is not for the faint of heart. Chemicals do alter your body, and some people don't react to them well because they don't eat right. Shapeshifter had a video and they were drinking Mountain Dew of some color, and they put all stuff in their bodies. They don't take care of their bodies, so their body's not going to heal.
Yeah, and that anger and that resentment and that, constantly wanting to get revenge and to
get attention.
And it's like, in the case of Shapeshifter, though, personally, I think, and I'm sure you do too, it's just a matter of time before Shapeshifter just retransitions.
Although they never really detransition.
Did they really do anything other than identify as a man, although remaining, and it's like they feel so upset when people say things, but it's like,
you're not doing anything to change it.
You could literally if you wanted to appear more male, you could cut that long mane of blonde hair off.
Right.
And
Stop wearing all the makeup.
Stop wearing makeup. Yeah. I mean, and I know that doesn't make you a woman or a man, but it sure would present.
Yeah, because you're trying to.
Richie did something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, so it's a matter of like, Shapeshifter doesn't want to do that. Right. Shapeshifter likes to appear feminine,
and that's okay.
You know, and the people that love Shapeshifter, they love that part, you know, of who they are.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's like, we're not saying the detransitioners need to do, like Joy, for instance, made a video the other day talking about he's not willing to, he likes his male presentation, you know, he misses his beard the way that it used to grow. I mean, this is one of those things that people don't understand. It's a battle for a lot of people because of what went wrong. You know, Joy couldn't continue to take testosterone because of health reasons. Many who detransitioned, their surgery went wrong. But if all these people, if things had gone right, would they actually be detransitioning? I don't believe so.
I don't even think they would be on the landscape.
Exactly. You know, they'd be living their lives.
Honestly. Yeah. And I think, like, in the case of Shapeshifters specifically, I really do think that, you know, Shapeshifter, along with many other homosexual, transsexuals out there, they have internalized homophobia.
Mm-hmm.
She mentioned it. The way that they deal with that is to transition. And my question is, what is so wrong with transitioning if you have internalized homophobia, so that you can just manage your life better and live your life as you want to live it?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, what is wrong with that?
There's absolutely nothing wrong. I don't know why people pick on that and call it, you know, it's homophobia, internalized. And I was like, yeah, it may well be. It may well be that one wants to walk life with some sort of peace. You know, when you've been marginalized, when you've been made fun of all your life because your mannerisms aren't the way they're supposed to be, because you walk and talk differently from what the typical sex is supposed to walk and talk, then of course you don't want any part of that. And you want to be able to do what makes you feel better about yourself. Some people get a nose job. Some people cut their hair differently. Some people do whatever. You know, we transsexuals transition so we could feel better in our skin, whether it's homophobia, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. It is our right, since we do have the capacity, the availability now in the medical system to do something about it. Why not? Who does it bother? Why do people have to get all upset about people wanting to present differently?
Because they say, oh, you're just living a lie. You're lying to society, and you shouldn't live a lie. You should live a life that's authentic and true. And it's like, okay, but what if you being who you are
is your authenticity?
You know, I mean, honestly, it's one of those things where it's like, why is it that people have such a conniption about the decisions that other people have when it comes to what they do with their body?
And I think a lot of people will say, well, it's because you're pushing it down, ramming it down people's throats, and you're teaching children, and you're getting involved in women's sports. That's all a
right-wing conspiracy game that they like to throw out there.
How many people actually compete in sports? You know, how many children are being converted to trans?
I mean, there was not but one trans person who had competed in the state of South Dakota, and that was several years ago, for the governor, Kristi Noem, to enact this bill protecting all these kids and making commercials about protecting the girls and stuff. And it's like, they had one person. The state of South Dakota has more cows in it than, or you know, it's like,
it's crazy.
It's
but
ridiculous.
It's just part of the plan. So during the 2022 midterm election campaign, Republican public officials targeted transgender rights in what the NPR and other news media have called the new front in the culture wars. Last month, Public Religion Research Institute American Values Survey appears to offer confirmation finding increased polarization on all measures of LGBTQ rights, in particular, American support for transgender rights has declined.
Public opinion on bathroom bills. Take one measure: whether laws should require trans people to use bathrooms that correspond to their sex assigned at birth, not their current gender identity. In 2016, only 35% of all Americans favored these bathroom bills, the first of which was proposed that year in North Carolina. And in 2022, after numerous other states proposed similar laws, the number of Americans supporting them rose to 52%.
The jump was especially pronounced for white evangelicals and Republicans. In 2016, only 41% of the white evangelicals and 44% of Republicans supported the requirement that transgender people use bathrooms that align with their sex assigned at birth. By 2022, the number doubled to 86% and 87%, respectively.
Other groups also increased their opposition to transgender rights, but the rise was less dramatic for Democrats and Americans who are unaffiliated with religion. Only 27% of Democrats favored bathroom bills in 2016, compared with 31% in 2022. Among non-religious respondents, support for requiring trans people to use the bathroom that aligns with their sex assigned at birth increased from 21% in 2016 to 34% in 2022.
So these numbers suggest that transgender issues are increasingly being lived out in polarizing ways among Americans. In other words, that the culture wars, quote unquote, narrative holds true. As sociologists, we have sought to dig deeper than the quantitative findings to understand why Americans hold such diverging beliefs.
Using Nebraska as a case study, we asked residents to explain their views about transgender bathroom use in their own words. The random sample of 938 mostly cisgender Nebraska residents who completed the male survey were evenly split across this issue, with a slight majority, 51%, saying transgender people should be required to use bathrooms that align with the sex they were assigned at birth.
Like the latest PRRI national data, our respondents who were politically conservative and white evangelicals were more likely to oppose transgender rights on the bathroom use. And it's always like, even all these like platforms, it's always the Christians that are like getting their nose in it.
Well, it's like white Christians were like the slave owners back in the day. You know, white Christians were the ones who justified racism and called out black people back in the day. I mean, they're the ones who didn't want to use the same, drinking fountain as the other. There's like rampant discrimination within white Christianity. And there's no difference now with gays, lesbians, transgender people, bisexual people, queer people, people that have a different belief system. Like it was Islamophobia was going on, it's crazy. It's like people just don't know how to get along with each other anymore, or they don't want to.
So in analyzing the 623 respondents who answered open-ended questions about bathroom bills, we found that support or opposition hinges on beliefs about the nature of gender itself.
Sociologists have described that these as believing in static gender assigned at birth and unchanging, or fluid gender, can change over the life course and can manifest differently for different people.
Supporters of transgender rights believe in gender fluidity and take transgender people experiences seriously. These respondents reason that people should live their lives as the way they identify themselves. They argue that to deny transgender people the ability to use the bathroom aligned with their gender identity is disrespectful, discriminating, and exposes them to needless humiliation.
Some supporters question why social life is organized around gender at all, and suggested gender-inclusive restrooms as an option that would allow everyone, trans or cis, to pee in peace, as one of our respondents wrote.
In contrast, opponents of transgender rights see gender change as illegitimate and privileged cisgender people experiences. Respondents reason that you cannot choose gender and that society should not be forced to recognize other categories that make that male and female.
Opponents also take for granted that social life should be organized by gender and position transgender people as threats to both the status quo and to cisgender people, especially women and children.
I don't understand how that could even be possible. People living their lives, you know. But to allow transgender people the ability to use the bathroom aligned with their gender identity is dangerous to our children and an invasion of our privacy, to respondents wrote. Like, that is just like witch hunt talk, and it's just BS.
The PRRI survey finds that Americans overall are more likely to view gender as static than as fluid. 59% of adult Americans surveyed divided sharply along political and religious lines. In 2022, 87% of white evangelical Protestants say that they believe there are only two genders, man or woman, compared with 68% of white mainline Protestants, 76% of Black Protestants, 70% of white Catholics, 51% of Hispanic Catholics, and 45% of non-religious respondents.
So 88% of Republicans believe there are only two genders, man or woman, compared to 66% of the independents and 36% of Democrats. These data reflect the broader political landscape, with white Protestant Republican pushing anti-trans legislation. Whether there's two sexes, I mean, yeah, but there's trans people that aren't happy with the sex that we were assigned at birth. So we took matters into our own hands. We exist. You can't get rid of us. It ain't going to happen. We're going to use your bathrooms because we got to pee. We got to poop. We got to do the things that we do.
Normal humans.
Right. So it's like, stop sexualizing it. Stop making it something evil. No one goes in there to do anything other than to relieve themselves like every other human being. But these people, the way they think, everything is a devil under every rock. Everything is evil. And that's where their minds are.
Absolutely. The stakes of the culture wars, though these findings obviously relate to transgender people, they implicate cisgender people too. The culture war over trans rights is part of a war over competing notions of gender and sexuality and how those should be regulated in the social world.
Thus, in 2022, we have observed simultaneous political attacks on transgender people, reproductive freedoms, and sex education. I mean, it's like they want to take us back to the 1800s. Yeah. You know, I mean, we've come so far and they don't like it. And they want to like stick us in a time capsule and go back to the 1800s. Americans are divided because we have fundamentally different vantage points over whose identities deserve protection and which experiences are to be prioritized and believed. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. You know, back in the day when I was advocating, I felt like there was so much advancement that we made. People were understanding. They were like seeing, okay, well, hey, these people are pretty cool. They're different, but they have a right to exist. And just all of a sudden, since these GOP have gotten their dirty hands in our business, we're seeing all of this. You know, and that's wrong. So, of course, when there's an election year, when there's, you know, they want to get voters all riled up, they come up with these bathroom issues. Now it's, you know, then
trans girls in sports
and now it's the children. Children, you know, trannies are coming for a child near you, that kind of thing. So let's see here. Iowa's governor said knowing boys from girls was as vital as knowing the difference between liberty and tyranny. I mean, seriously, knowing the difference between liberty and tyranny is knowing the difference between boys and girls. I mean, it's like, that's just, yeah.
The GOP candidate for Attorney General in Nevada called for fewer transgender people to exist, period, using and then later doubling down on a slur.
And the Republicans' nominee for governor in Illinois used a debate question on abortion access to spread a conspiracy theory about the current governor's family and portrayed gender-affirming care for trans youth as experimental gender surgeries.
Republicans in 2022 midterm races We're embracing more anti-transgender rhetoric than at any year that LGBTQ plus experts can remember. The rhetoric is frequently tied to parental rights, is what they say, which is invoked by proponents of bills to remove information about LGBTQ plus people from schools and libraries or keep trans youth out of sports.
We're trying to move forward, not backwards. The reason education is needed is because these youth need to understand or see other people like them, understand that their feelings that they're feeling about themselves, whether they're gay, lesbian, trans, queer, it's normal.
Or if they're in a family
Yeah.
that has two moms
Yeah.
or two dads, that they're not evil.
Exactly.
They exist and they shouldn't be embarrassed about sharing their family with other people.
And what these people have to understand, people like us, we had heterosexual parents and we turned out this way. So there's a lot of gay parents that their kids are straight. So no one's trying to like recruit, no one's trying to rub off on your kids. It's just a matter of fact. Hey, we exist. Don't feel like you're foreign and alien from another planet because you have different feelings that the average individual does.
And it's like the old AIDS, scare, that people were all worried about. Oh, if I even come in contact with a person that has HIV, I may get it.
Yeah. It's ignorance, total ignorance, and it's pretty sad.
In ads.
In ads and on the stump, candidates are sharing incorrect, inflammatory statements that are often used as a basis to restrict gender-affirming care. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Outside groups, notably the America First Legal Foundation, just the name, America First, and the American Principles Project, Super PAC, are adding more fuel to the fire. A recent ad from the American Principles Project, described by President Terry Schilling as the group's closing ad in the 2022 election, uses photos of early surgery scars from transgender people whose faces are blurred and accuses the Biden administration and Democrats of pushing transgender drugs and surgeries on kids due to their support of the Equality Act.
It's on another level from prior years, said David Stacy, Government Affairs Director for the LGBTQ rights organization Human Rights Campaign. The rhetoric is harsher and more mainstream Republicans, notably gubernatorial candidates, are willing to use it on the stump, he said.
Anti-trans ads have aired on TV and streaming services in at least 25 states during the midterms, the HRC found. The group tracked $50 million, including $4 million in radio ads from America First Legal, founded by former Trump advisor and racist and bigot Stephen Miller, being poured into TV, streaming, radio, and digital anti-trans ads, which mostly targeted parents with misinformation on gender-affirming care for trans kids.
And that's what's happening. They're really creating this massive, like they're using the Chloe. And I wanted to share when we're done with this, some more information regarding, Chloe's claim that she's been pushed on this and that she was just a child, but there's somebody who really points some really good information, remind me. Gender-affirming surgeries are extremely rare for trans youth, who typically receive puberty blockers as part of transitioning at an early age and later hormone therapy to alleviate the distress of gender dysphoria. The process of getting a prescription and treatment generally takes months or years of working with medical professionals.
Now that's interesting because this is what has been the protocol is puberty blockers first and then hormones later. It's not 13 puberty blockers and testosterone.
That's a lie. They're lying. They're like just putting all this information and it's all based on lies.
American Principles Project Director of Policy John Schwepp said on a Missouri radio show in September that the organization pledged to spend $10 million across 6 states. The group, he said, is focused on gender-affirming care for trans youth, which he equated to Democrats trying to sterilize children through sex changes, a practice that does not happen, as well as trans youth playing school sports aligning with their gender identity, and the effort in schools to sexualize kids.
I mean, this stuff gets people upset. These lies that they're spreading, it's like massive conspiracy. They're making a mountain out of a molehill, right? These lies and the propaganda that are in these attacks are directly responsible for increased stigma, discrimination, and violence against transgender and non-binary people, said Geoff Wachowski, HRS campaign director.
In addition to the risk of increased violence from campaign ads, advocates fear that candidates will translate their own rhetoric into anti-LGBTQ plus policies if they are elected into office, and will be more emboldened to spread this rhetoric in 2024 if Republicans do well across the board, which they didn't.
If people who are running on an anti-trans platform are successful in these November elections, I think it's going to unleash an even more intense, sustained effort to capitalize politically on vulnerable trans kids, said Chris Errol, staff attorney at LGBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders. Glad.
It also could have a chilling effect. Sean Malloy, vice president of political programs at Victory Fund, worries that if anti-LGBTQ plus Republicans do well in the midterms, it will just put up even higher walls for LGBTQ plus candidates trying to step forward.
For some politicians, this election cycle has inspired pledges of a renewed push for anti-trans legislation. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, when pressed by a conservative radio host, promised that if he is reelected, he'll back legislation against gender-affirming care for trans youth, the Washington Post reported.
And he did get elected.
Mm-hmm.
Although anti-trans views are hardly the core focus of most candidates' campaigns, and it's unclear how successful anti-trans rhetoric will be in swaying voters, which we know now that it wasn't as, as positive for them as they thought it would be. Many Republicans are prioritizing it as a key way to reach their base, and advocates are worried about the damage it will cause.
It is signaling to their entire voting base that trans people are not who we say we are, that there is some virtue in refusing to be respectful to trans people, said Ari Drennan, LGBTQ plus program director for Media Matters, a progressive nonprofit and media watchdog. Far-right media is helping to spread the rhetoric further, she said, as outlets like Newsmax elevate campaign ads and host candidates to discuss anti-trans views.
This is an all-out assault from the right-wing media, Drennan said. Across the country, ads in support of Republican contenders use anti-trans rhetoric to attack Democrats and further spread anti-trans rhetoric.
In Florida, the state Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee released an ad accusing Democrat Florida State Senate candidate Joe Goff Marcel of being backed by advocates of free sex change operation for minors.
A campaign ad against Michigan's ballot measure codifying abortion access in the state falsely claims that the measure would enable trans youth to receive puberty blockers without parental consent. At least some voters in the state have been confused by the misinformation, that's the whole plan, as a local outlet in Detroit published a fact check in response to a reader seeking clarification on the measure.
Another American Principle Project ad urges voters to protect their children by voting against Democratic Abigail Spanberger, who's running for re-election in Virginia's 7th Congressional District, in attempts to tie her to inaccurate depiction of gender-affirming care for trans youth, which the ad falsely portrays as a way to chemically castrate children. Didn't, what's her name, Blake, use the same thing against Hobbs here? I mean, they're all using the same script.
In Texas, Dallas area voters started receiving mailers this past weekend paid for the America First Legal Foundation, accusing President Joe Biden and Democrats of, quote, pushing radical and irreversible gender experiments on children, unquote, the Dallas Morning News reports.
It's pretty sad that they have to stoop down to that level. They can't gain their campaign by promising something positive for your future. No, they have to target minorities. They have to target people that are already having a hard time in life to try to get their base riled up and out to the voting booth. The far right used to use a lot of dog whistles and coded language, and they're not even hiding any longer what if they really trying to do here, which is further marginalize the trans community and further move the trans community into the shadows through direct attacks, said Six Strokes, GLAAD former chief program officer, who now consults the LGBTQ media advocacy organization on its voter engagement.
Some GOP candidates like Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, plus Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky and South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem are releasing their own campaign ads that use anti-trans rhetoric. Paul and Noem, both running for re-election, have dedicated campaign ads against trans students playing in sports that match their gender identity. Noem has stood out as a candidate working early and hard to tout her support of anti-trans legislation to voters.
So Paul's campaign has also taken anti-trans rhetoric to stump speeches. I wouldn't expect the Democrats to know what a recession is. They can't even define what a woman is, said Kelly Paul, speaking in her husband's place at Kentucky annual Fancy Farm picnic.
Other candidates, including South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, a Republican, are tying anti-trans rhetoric to broader anti-LGBTQ plus stances. McMaster said at a debate this month that he still opposes gay marriage, as well as trans students playing in sports that match their gender identity. Reynolds, Paul, Noem, and McMaster are all heavily favored to win re-election.
It's pretty sad, pretty sad stuff. So even if the anti-trans rhetoric doesn't clearly help Republicans attract voters, Stokes doesn't expect it to go away anytime soon. He expects to see politicians double down on the rhetoric, especially in state legislations, which have introduced another record year of anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ bills. Nasty people they are.
I think that those who have weaponized these issues are going to believe that they worked, even in places where perhaps they didn't win, he said. There are still some bright spots. Wojcicki said, LGBTQ plus representation among those running for office is growing. A record number of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming candidates ran this year, according to the Victory Fund, and LGBTQ plus candidates ran in all 50 states for the first time.
That representation matters. In fact, in the face of these attacks, to have somebody on the floor of the chamber where their bills are being debated and to be able to speak to them from their own personal perspective is incredibly powerful. And that gives me hope, Wojcicki said. It all started with Trump, right? I mean, prior to Trump, we had Obama, which was pretty favorable towards the LGBTQ, past the actual ability for gays to get married legally. And after Obama last term and Trump won, everything has gone downhill. There's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of division.
But that was kind of the plan, was to seed the public through social media with all these conspiracy theories, with, distrust in the voting system that we have in this country, the elections, how they're run. Even in this state right now, as they're counting votes in a county just right down the street from us, that's in the news, Maricopa County, they're still attacking the process. Whereas in years past, elections have run and people haven't known the results, because if they were close elections, people just waited for things to kind of figure themselves out. Because if it's a tight race, it's obviously going to get down to the wire. You're going to have to count every vote.
Right.
So, you have these people stirring the pot and just making things up, saying, the system's broken. We need to fix it because, it's unfair, and I'm going to fix it. But if I get into the office of governor, says Carrie Lake.
And this brings me back to Chloe, who is like the poster child for the GOP. They really like her, the little, and it's funny because right now they're pretending to be this all girly and little pigtails and the dual dresses, and they're just really using this image. And, my teenage years life has been a accumulation of excruciating pain, regret, that most importantly, injustice. It's impossible for me to recoup what I've lost, but I will ensure no child will be harmed at the hands of these liars and mutilators. I'm suing these monsters, right? Well, we're going to take a look at, let's see here. Bear with me here as I find, this is what Chloe looked like, during her time that she believed she was trans, and was all gun ho about it and wouldn't take no for an answer. I mean, we talked about the fact that her first endocrinologist said no,
right,
because they saw the state of like
mental
incompetence,
state.
mental state, but they found a way. And
yeah, I mean, there's a ways around it. You can find gender affirming care if you want to.
Exactly, but they were totally denied, and they found a way to go against it. Or there's this person on that was talking. You came out to your parents as a transgender boy. That was your decision, and your parents, ? They supported that decision because they are your parents and you are their child, right? So they go on, this person, which brings a lot of important points, and said, let's find it here. All right. We could read that.
PSI as I
let me bring it here. So, okay.
As I read your story, I kept waiting for the final blow, the one where it said that you were forced at gunpoint to do this, but it wasn't there. In your own words, you chose this path.
And then they go, a quick Google search on the negative consequences of taking Lupron might have stopped you and your parents. In 1998, my reproductive endocrinologist wanted me to start Lupron. Then I discovered this. There's Lupron.com. I didn't take it because I researched it.
But now that you've changed your mind, which you have every right to do, you're playing the victim and suing the medical professionals who helped you. Accept responsibility for your choices. And that's what we want to say to every detransitioner. Yeah. It's just like, I mean, you're unable so many times, so many of you in your videos, wherever you come out saying stuff, you're always saying that it's not your fault, that you were pushed into it, that it's, that you were innocent. And it's like, so many of you were so obsessed, just as you are now, to detransition and to be this voice and stuff of like, of anger and frustration at the evil medical monsters and stuff that took away your childhood or your teenhood. You're still in that same obvious, frustrating anger.
Exactly. And then just, they're being used by these conservative media outlets, Tucker, for crying out loud, and it's just.
I mean, let's not forget the woman that's standing right next to Chloe right now. She is a California Republican Party member, leader. She was on Trump's 2020 campaign. I mean, these people are working together. So they get on the news and they come across as like some outside entity, but they are part of the broken system that is Washington.
Yeah. And, utilizing a puppet, because Chloe is their puppet, easily puppeteered and shown like a little poster child of like, oh, look at what the medical community did to me. And it's like, no, you did it to yourself. The parents have the same capacity as that woman that I just shared, to do the research, to know the side effects. It's all there. Maybe you could claim ignorance back in 2003 when I transitioned, but this day and age,
and
information is all there.
And my question is, and has been, where are Chloe's parents?
You never see them.
If they're so upset with what happened to their daughter, wouldn't a father or a mother be out there advocating for the safety of their child?
Yeah.
I mean, why are the parents so silent? Why have they not spoken? And this, like, well, they don't want the attention and stuff. Well, it's your child, and your child's in the major limelight of publicity right now, online, on news shows, and you're not going to show your face to lend support. There's something fishy.
Something very
that.
fishy. Now, throughout Chloe's medical experience in California, the facilities and institutions actively promoted, encouraged, and advertised the availability of these treatments. I mean, medical facilities will do that. I mean, whether it's getting a root canal, whether it's getting LASIK surgery for your eyes, I mean, that is what the medical industrial complex does. You know, Chloe and her parents were not informed of the options for psychiatric treatment. Hello?
Yeah.
I mean, options for psychiatric, they're out there. Most parents don't go and take their kids to a gender specialist.
And the thing is that Chloe already had comorbid issues and was already on a litany of different drugs.
Yeah.
Was already like a psychiatric patient.
Yeah, on antidepressant, anti-anxiety, like most of these teens and most of individuals are. So it's like, okay, these things aren't working. Let's see if transitioning works. These parents were probably desperate because we know some of these kids that have ADHD, that have behavioral issues, how horrible it is to try to contain them, to try to get them to be civilized, because they just have these temper tantrums. And you could tell that Chloe was a handful.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that the parents are trying desperately how, you know, then I'm sure that they used the off myself card, you know, because they're claiming that the establishment told the parents, would you rather have a dead child or a live son or whatever? And that's the typical words that they use to scare people.
Of course.
You know, and these people aren't saying that. Do you realize the ramifications, the lawsuits? So this lawsuit, I am sure, is not going to go very far, because I am pretty sure that this establishment crossed their T's and dotted their I's.
Yeah. I mean, defendants also falsely informed Chloe and her parents that Chloe was at a high risk for suicide, like you said, unless she socially and medically transitioned to appear more like a male.
I mean, that, you know, these kids are using that line because they tell each other online what to say so that they can get what they want. And we all know when teenagers want something, there's nothing, no one could stop them at all. So
and no one's talking about the fact that these clinicians have been under like a lot of pressure to affirm trans people, because not too long ago there was violence that happened, you know, at a certain therapist clinic in San Diego where a trans person was refused, and then they came and you know, because of their
and they killed the therapist, you know. I mean, so a lot of these therapists have been trained by the individuals. They know that if they don't give the individuals what the individuals want, they're going to be eight-balled and no longer seeked as therapists, you know. So it's like the medical establishment is giving us what we wanted. We didn't want gatekeeping, so gatekeeping got removed.
And I think gatekeeping was a good thing. I think gatekeeping was a good alternative for, you know, controlling what was going to be allowed to happen within, you know, the lives of different types of trans people or people presenting their situation to transition. And I think that by just leaving the gates wide open and not putting any fences up, that was a mistake, I think.
Yeah, definitely, because come one, come all is not always a great thing. There's a lot of false positives, as we're seeing with all the detransitioners that are popping out of the woodwork. They weren't trans. They might have been genderqueer. There might have been individuals who are gay or lesbians that felt shame, and they just couldn't cope. They couldn't cope with the transition. They didn't feel that they could pull it off. They didn't feel that they could actually walk life as the gender they transition to. And that happens a lot. It's not easy. It's not easy for a person to have been born one way, been socialized one way, and then have to sit there and face the world as a sex that you're transitioning to. Whether it's a trans guy that has to sit there and face off with a biological male, let's say in a sauna situation or a steam room situation or in a gym, any confrontation, any kind of argument. If you don't have what it takes, you're going to be drowned. You're going to be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something to be taken lightly. And the same thing goes for trans women. It's not like playing dress up. It's not like you just put on a wig and a dress or paint the mustache on and walk around. No, you've got to live life. You got to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody has that ability. So I understand that those that transitioned, again, it was all fun and game. When it gets to the real life experience, you're not feeling so confident anymore.
Or they actually transitioned because they thought that was going to alleviate all the issues that they've already been suffering. And they thought that this was a way that that was going to be the answer to alleviate all the suffering that they had endured before.
But that's so limiting, because to say, well, if I have a headache and I just, put a cold pack on my head, that's going to alleviate the headache. Well, the headache could be caused by migraines, chemical reaction, not enough food in your system, too much coffee. So you can't expect transitioning to solve all your problems. You transition not to solve a problem. You transition to live your life in peace and in harmony with who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about getting rid of anxiety. It's not about getting rid of depression, because depression is going to be there. Anxiety is going to be there. We're humans. Transition is there to live your life in peace as the person you identify as.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what these trenders have done. They think, oh, okay, I'm depressed and I'm anxious, so if I transition, my life is going to be better. No.
But it didn't fix what I was dealing with. It's of course it's not going to.
It's not magically going to. Just because you decide to cut your hair and take some tea, it's not going to fix your issue. It's not a fixer of issues. It's just living in peace with your meat suit. It's being able to live life without being criticized because you're born a woman and you walk and talk like a man. So everybody's making fun of you. That kind of thing. You're living life in the essence of who you are.
And that is what makes you feel congruent to yourself, is being able to do that.
And it's not, people make fun of like biology. You can't change your biology. You can't change your chromosome. We don't care to change the chromosome. I'm just happy to be able to walk around like me instead of having to walk around like something that was not me. And I know that many of you don't understand that, but you're not trans, so you're not capable of understanding that.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the bottom line. No one's claiming. I'm not claiming to be a man. I'm just a good facsimile of one. I walk my life as the man that I feel that I am inside. You don't understand that. It's not up to you to understand that. It's not up to GOP or politics or Christians or any of you to question, to make fun of, and to try to control.
Exactly.
So take that, you dirty animals. All right, so one last article here. Stop obsessing over where trans kids use the bathroom. And I think this is so sad. I mean, you have these young kids that are socially transitioned. They may not have even taken anything yet, but they haven't reached puberty. So little boys and little girls pretty much look the same. There's nothing until puberty kicks in. There's no evidence to suggest giving transgender American access to the spaces we deserve puts other people at risk. When they use that line and lie, that's all it is. In fact, transgender people are one of the most at-risk groups and are a frequent target of deadly violence.
Transgender people over the age of 16 are 4 times more likely to become the victims of assault than cisgender people. And those attacks are on the rise as Republicans from the flames of hatred fan the flames of hatred, while Democrats often offer only tepid support.
Even as a high school student, I saw that threats to the lives of trans Americans had reached a dangerous tipping point. I never wanted to be an activist, I was just a kid. But it felt like the task of spreading greater awareness about a community that had been pushed to the margins fell to me.
I had to do the important work of educating the adults in my world, including those at the high school board meeting, some of which appeared had never even heard the word transgender beforehand.
Those people were furious and fearful. They had been served baseless rhetoric that appealed to their biases. And that's the key, appeal to their biases. And that has grown into a dangerous reality for transgender people in America today.
These dangers are many, and they don't all come at the hands of a potentially violent aggressor. For example, a report from the Williams Institute at the UCLA Law School, published in March 2022, estimates that 54,000 transgender people between the ages of 13 to 17 were at risk of losing access to gender-affirming medical care amid a flurry of anti-trans bills proposed in state houses across the United States.
And that's become a reality in Florida. And what is it, Arkansas as well?
Arkansas,
and
Oklahoma.
Yeah. These treatments that have allowed me and other transgender people to become the people we were intended to have been studied and peer reviewed and are best practice developed by the American Medical Association, American Association of Pediatrics, American Psychiatric Association, and the Endocrine Society.
And other leading health organizations, yet across the country, they are being banned, challenged, or indefinitely delayed, while people hoping to transition are put through a series of hoops and hurdles before getting access to treatment.
But according to these GOP, it's like, oh, your kids are, boom, right away being like it's some sort of like go to the dentist and have your tooth pulled type of thing. There are only about 300,000 transgender youth, but according to Matt Waltz, there's millions and millions being put on puberty blocker in America. And yet, as Republicans obsess, because it's an obsession now, over these children's bodies, it's like they're so obsessed. They really are. Bomb threats are directed against hospitals and schools. Now, how messed up is that?
I know. Parents are being reported for child abuse, for supporting and loving their children. This assault is being launched on every front. In the end, my activism and willingness to fight for my rights led to my suing the Board of Education in Gloucester County for excluding me from the boys' restrooms at my school.
Gloucester High School had insisted I use the girls' bathroom, later requiring me to use the bathroom in the nurse's office. They always do that. They're always so far.
I know. My case ended in a victory for trans students. The win at the Fourth Circuit level meant that within the jurisdiction of Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia, the protections afforded by Title IX of the Education Amendment of 1972 include transgender people.
The Supreme Court declined to weigh in, allowing the decision to stand. As a result, all schools in the Fourth Circuit were required to adopt a policy in their schools that provided for the needs and rights of transgender students based on the model policy set by the Department of Education. It's we were walking today and I said to you, all this stuff that they're trying to do, it's going to backfire on them. It has to. Hate never wins. Never, ever wins. And lastly, I lied. We had one more. I didn't realize we had this New Tennessee bill banning male or female impersonators in public could criminalize drag performers and trans people. And the pre-filed bill, which will be taken up next year, would make it a crime to do drag where it could be viewed by a person who is not an adult.
Senate Bill 3, filed for introduction the day after the midterm election by Republican State Senator and Majority Leader Jack Johnson, would classify male or female impersonators who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest as adult cabaret performance.
If passed, drag artists would be banned from performing on public property or anywhere they could be viewed by a person who is not an adult. According to the bill's wording, it will be debated in the next legislative session, which begins January 10th, 2023.
Alejandro Caraballo, an instructor at Harvard Law School's Cyber Law Clinic, wrote that the bill's vague language was designed to apply beyond drag performers.
The language of male or female impersonators could be applied to trans people for simply existing as themselves. She wrote in a tweet, they're not just going after drag queens, they are trying to criminalize trans and queer people in public spaces. You know, activist Aaron called the bill terrifying. And not long ago, if you were dressed as a woman and you were a man, they could take you to jail for impersonating a female.
Yeah, back in the day in Germany, before, the Nazis cracked down, the Sex Institute over in Germany by Magnus Hirschfeld, they would provide documentation to trans people in order to be able to walk around because they now had an ID card that signified that they were who they were, But
here in the United States, many drag queens, cross-dressers, and even probably trans people because there wasn't really a thing then, would be taken to jail.
And this is what would happen in Germany too. They would be taken to jail, and that's why they came up with those cards.
So this is one way that they are going to try to eliminate this.
Right. This bill is so vague that it could be targeted at trans actors, comedians. Story Hour, she tweeted, SB3 proposed that first offenses would be classified as a Class A misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in prison and or fines of up to $2,500. Second or repeat infractions would be Class E felonies with prison sentences up to 6 years and fines up to $3,000.
The bill comes as part of a wider right-wing push to separate children from anything LGBTQ 2S plus related. Lawmakers in states like Florida and Texas, both of which also maintain Republican control in the midterms, have brought up legal bans on all ages drag shows, and right-wing groups and individuals have threatened family-friendly drag events across the U.S. and Canada.
Conservative attacks on drag come on the heels of many Republican-controlled states, including Tennessee, passing legislation that targets gender-affirming healthcare or youth sports participation.
Last year saw the Tennessee legislation pass a bathroom bill that bans trans people from using the correct restroom in public schools, laws that ban trans kids from playing on the correct sports team, and laws that mandate parents be given a 30-day period to opt children out of sexual orientation or gender identity curriculum.
Earlier this year, the state extended the trans sports ban by passing a law to withhold funding from schools that let trans students play as their correct gender. And last month, lawmakers tried to pressure Vanderbilt University Medical Center into halting gender-affirming care for trans youth.
A bathroom sign law that passed in 2021, which mandated that establishment who let trans people use the correct restroom had signed announcing the policy was struck down by the state Supreme Court in May.
Republicans control all state-level power in Tennessee, holding the governor's office, 21-seat majority in the state Senate, and a 51-seat majority in the State House of Representatives in the wake of Tuesday's midterm elections.
On the same day as SB3 was introduced, two other bills aiming to roll back LGBTQ to SS plus rights were introduced to the Tennessee legislature. Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1 would criminalize gender-affirming care that allows minors to identify with or live as a purported identity inconsistent with the minor sex. So that would mean that even socially transitioning would be considered illegal.
In the state of Tennessee, yeah.
That's pretty sad.
While a similar bill to restrict gender-affirming care for youth and classify it as child abuse, HB 578, failed to pass in 2021, it remains to be seen whether the current anti-LGBTQ plus bills will meet the same fate.
So, we really have problems. Houston, we have a problem here that if these hateful GOP, gender oppressing people, get their way, they would literally have us vanished.
Yeah, they would eliminate our existence. Although you never can eliminate the existence of trans people. We've been around, we continue to be around, and we will always be around.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I mean, there's no way you can stop a human spirit from existing.
It's going to backfire. I really truly believe that it will backfire because hate never wins.
Well, the new generation has
Yeah.
spoken, and 18 to 29-year-olds will be older in the next voting cycle. So when, the Republicans come up to get voted on in 2024, these kids are going to be, some of them older ones are going to be in their 30s and already 21-year-olds, and they're going to make their voices known.
Definitely. They, we're going to see a massive change. And of course, when things are changing, there's always that turmoil, that it's like
growing
pains, that storm, that calm before the storm, and then it looks like it's really bad, but then it passes, and blue skies and sunshine comes right through the clouds, that kind of thing. I don't believe that these Christians, conservatives, hateful people will ever get their way. It's not going to happen. It will never happen. But they're gonna go kicking and screaming. They're gonna give us a hard time. They're gonna try all the rotten tricks that they have under their sleeves and do the things that they do.
Yeah, and just demonize people that are already oppressed heavily, for their choices or their presentation. Before it was people that were a darker skin color that were being persecuted, and still, well, to a certain degree, they still are.
Yeah.
But
let them have their fun now, because it's not going to be something that they're going to be able to do forever. And hey, I know that what goes up must come down, and they just they're toting wrong. They're on the wrong side of history, and they're pushing their God, that is a angry, warring, hateful deity that won't win. Just won't win. So next week, we were told that we're biting a little bit more than we could chew with this individual, but we always like a challenge, right? And I think it's important to have friendly debates, to, I got something in my eye, to have friendly debates, to allow people to speak and share their views in
a respectful manner.
Yeah. Next week, we're going to have, she goes by the name of Exolancic, and she's a California-based licensed speech-language pathologist, which I've worked with many speech-language pathologists when I was an occupational therapist, so it'll be very interesting. And she's serving a diverse caseload in private practice, so she's still a speech pathologist.
Exolancic also has a degree in gender and women's studies and linguistics from UC Berkeley, as well as master's in education, speech pathology.
And she writes essays and produces video content about topics related to sex and gender, pronouns, and the civil rights of women and girls.
She is formerly transgender and a non-binary identifying person who now recognizes that a woman is an adult human female.
And that seems to always be, in the circles of gender critical Christians and stuff like that. They like 2 + 2 = 4. Yes, we know 2 + 2 = 4. But then 5 + 5 = 10, and people have different ways of expressing, have different ways of identifying.
Well, it's like there's no debate as to what an adult human female is. I mean, obviously, it's biological, I mean, it is set in its interpretation of
Mhm.
understanding of what defines what an adult human female is. But it doesn't take away from the existence of trans women, right? It doesn't take away from the existence of trans men,
Mhm.
because trans men are not men, but they are not women either.
Exactly.
Trans women are not men, but they're not women either. You know, so it's not like we're trying to redefine biological dimorphism.
And we're not trying to take
We're just
away.
saying that there are people that sit on the spectrum of their gender identity that may not quite line up with what is considered normal to the two sexes.
Right. And we're not lying to anyone. We're just living our existence. We're, it's like when I walk the streets, whether it's work or whether it's at the gym, I'm not lying to anyone. I'm just existing as me. No one needs to know what's in between my legs. That's nobody's business, unless I'm having a relationship with that person. That's the only time. And my medical doctor, if there's some sort of procedure that needs to be done and they need to know my biology so they don't overdose me or underdose me. But other than that, it's nobody's business. And we're all entitled to live our lives the way we want to live it, and it's, I don't understand why all these GOPs and all these religious zealots feel that they have the authority to do so.
Well, they want people to understand what they understand and what they believe in, because if they can convince you to believe as they believe, then they feel like they've done something good for humanity, because it's important for them to make those distinctions.
Right.
That's kind of like they're on like a mission to evangelize the world, right, with their gospel.
Well, all they're doing is they're destroying the world, and they're spreading a lot of hate. They're hurting a lot of people in the quest of helping them. And, help only becomes help if someone's asking you for that help. If you're doing something against somebody's will, like when you say, I'm going to pray for you, and no one asks you to pray for them, that's invasive, and that's disrespectful in many ways.
It's meddling into someone else's right of existence.
Exactly.
One of the things that struck me this morning was when we were listening to an interview with Magic Johnson and some other athlete who was interviewing him, and he was talking about his son EJ, and he talked about how the interviewer was asking Magic about how he was able to accept his son and what he would say, how he felt about that. And in the Black community, that is a taboo subject.
Just like in the Hispanic,
having a gay son is like the kiss of death for Black men. So the amazing thing was that Magic was like, he's my son.
Yeah.
I love him. And I told him that regardless of how he identified, who he loved, how he presented himself, that he was just going to love him and let him know that he is loved regardless of anything. And I think that's what so many times feminists, Christians, right-wing Republicans, you all miss the boat when it comes to just loving people, accepting people for who they are, where they're at, and in the fact that simply by being human, that they are worth dignity.
Well, they're on the wrong side of history, and they'll quickly learn that because we ain't going away. They're like so. In a way, I think they have OCD in some sort of way, because they want to tell people, well, you're not this, you're this, and this can't be changed. And it's like, but who cares? We're living.
I mean, Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh in that interview, Matt Walsh was like, why do I have to be forced to live in the delusions of some other. It's like, this is like way overthought by these people, because no one is forcing them to live in another person's delusion.
No.
People are just existing and living.
It's like, we don't need your approval.
I mean, who
seriously.
cares?
I mean,
who cares what Matt Walsh and Joe Rogan think about you or I?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we don't live for their approval.
No, not at all. You know, and as far as like the gender crits worrying about trans women entering their spaces, trans women have been entering your spaces forever, and you could be none the wiser. You know, because you're, of course, if you have someone who doesn't pass and they're, you know, yeah, but the majority that are truly trans and are living their lives as women, even though they're trans women, but they're living their lives as women, and trans men are living their lives as men. I mean, we know our biology, but we live our lives as the gender we transition to. Yeah. We are amongst you, and you might be none the wiser. You know, you may not even know.
But the irony of it is that there was a story of a biological female who had short hair and was in the women's restroom, and you know, some woman was like pegging her as a trans person and was just like, you don't belong in here, your kind shouldn't be inside my bathroom. And she's like, I'm a biological female, you know. I mean, it's like the irony is that they're picking on even their own.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because now it's just this whole,
it's like this
psychosis, you know, this massive, like, everybody wants to get into everybody's business.
I mean, she had to like have her boyfriend vouch for her outside.
Yeah. And it's just crazy world. And these people are just not understanding that they're not going to win. You're not going to win with hate. Definitely not. Times are changing. Human beings are evolving. And dinosaurs die out every single time.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And next week, stay tuned for it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to it.
Yeah. Seeing what we all learn from each other and how we could agree to disagree and all that good stuff. Because, you know, we may not always agree, but we could agree to disagree and be respectful towards one another. Learn to coexist. Anyway, guys, catch us next week. We love you. But remember to always love yourselves too and each other.